If you think you are nervous about your upcoming performance appraisal, imagine receiving a life review. It's not about getting a raise or promotion, but it is about returning and living without fear and loving others and treating them well. That is just one experience you might have should you die and come back. Hi, it's Margaret Maloney, and welcome to Season 3 of the Death Dhamma Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm so appreciative that you are part of my community. And yet, I seek not to be attached to the idea of the podcast or even to the idea of our community. And that's our topic this season: attachment, clinging, and aversion. What happens when we really want something? What happens when we really don't want something? And what does it do to our suffering and dissatisfaction? Let's dive in and find out a little bit more with today's episode. Do you know someone who has had a near-death experience? They died and then they came back? Our guest today, Eric Bennett, knows many such people. He interviews them on his podcast, Round Trip Death, and today he brings us an uplifting message. Everyone, welcome. Glad that you are here today. And I have a special guest with us, Eric Bennett. And Eric has a podcast called the Round Trip Death Podcast. And so you can see why he's a great guest for us to have here on the Death Dhamma Podcast. And I'm going to let Eric tell you a little bit more about himself. So Eric, thank you so much for being here.
Sure. I'm happy to be here. Oh, you want to hear a little bit about me? My main business has been in the advertising and marketing world for many years. And my agency now specializes in branded podcasts for companies. And that's the Barefoot Group.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been interested in near-death experiences for so many years. And so I have a personal podcast that I am the host of, which is Round Trip Death.
Okay. And I did see Barefoot Group, and I think people can find you at, is it barefootgroup.com?
Yeah, thebarefootgroup.com. And they can find the podcast at roundtripdeath.com.
Okay, beautiful. And I think it's important for people to know that because I want them to be able to find you. And, you know, it's nice. I think it's a nice combination that you have a podcast and you help people with their branded podcasts. So he is a very important resource to us on a couple of fronts here, everyone. So Eric, what got you interested in round trip death or near-death experiences?
Well, it really goes back to... as a child, I grew up hearing a family story, a real life story that had happened to someone who would be my uncle. Okay. And he passed away when he was 14 years old from kidney failure. Now, this was way back during the Depression. They lived in a small town in Idaho. I don't know what kind of medical care there was for that kind of thing then, but he passed away at home. And one of the things that I heard was shortly before he passed away that he said, "Hey, I hear voices of children and laughter." And then he said that he saw children playing. And I never knew what to do with that. My mother, who passed that on to me, didn't know what to do with that. And in the last quite a few years, I've read a number of books on near-death experiences. And, there's nothing like just talking to people and interviewing people that have actually had these experiences to really get a depth of what it's like and be able to, kind of dig into what's happened to them through questions and through their experiences.
I think that's great. You know what strikes me and what I really appreciate is that in your family, there was this experience and the story that went along with it. And nobody, well, as far as we know, nobody edited it out. Like nobody just said you would have had an uncle, but he died. They tell the full story, the experience of what he had. And I think that's lovely because I would say maybe not everyone is open to that discussion. So I find that to be really, really nice. And then I did notice that, and it must be really nice for people to be able to talk to you about their experiences. And, I was wondering, because we hear about these things once in a while, but I was looking through your podcast, of course, and there are many episodes. So everyone, it's not like Eric spoke to 4 people. there are so many people. There's such a trove of information here that I found that to be very interesting, and I don't know how long you've been doing this. I went back, this year and a little bit before. How long have you been having these conversations?
So the podcast itself has only been live for just over a year.
Okay.
And that's one of the fun things about a podcast, as you know, is you can see where listeners are all over the world. And it's fascinating to see that people are interested in this topic everywhere. And the podcast is not in any way about me. It's about the guests that I have on and them telling their stories. And the stories are so varied. We hear the typical, oh, I left my body, I saw a light, I went through this tunnel. And there are some like that, but really the majority are quite different than that. And they're all over the spectrum as to what kinds of experiences people have. And I find it fascinating.
Okay. And, I'm going to ask you about situations where people maybe didn't want to leave because there's something they didn't want to leave, or why they came back. I'm going to ask you about that, but I can't resist. I'm so sorry. I'm just curious. I know you must have a story or two that like really stand out to you. And I was wondering if you'd be willing to share that with us.
Every single one stands out to me, but the ones that probably stand out the most are the ones that have some, kind of amazement factor with them. And I don't want the podcast to be about the, whoa, can you believe that happened? It's about the message and what people learn from their experience. But for example, some of the ways people die are so interesting. We had a guest on from Australia by the name of Greg Keeley, and he was in the Australian Navy doing some maneuvers down in Antarctica. And long story short, fell overboard, was actually run over by a big Navy ship.
Ouch.
And then run over by the small boat that was trying to rescue him.
Ouch.
And drowned and was rescued. And you just go, what? It's 34-degree water and he's run over by a ship. What? And then there's and he is so fun to talk to. And then there's Vinnie Tolman, who was on the show right at the beginning of this year, back in January. And he was dead for about an hour and a half before he was revived. And, the fact that he doesn't have brain damage, that 3 days later he walked out of the hospital, checked himself out of the hospital and went home. Some of those things are fascinating. The stories of what they experienced on the other side are, kind of sacred in a way, very sacred in some ways. Some people have a hard time sharing them and haven't shared them. And so I hate to sensationalize those, but the things that people see and experience are wonderful. And the main thing is it's lovely to hear people try to explain the magnitude and breadth of the love and peace that they feel.
And that's a beautiful message.
They just can't even describe it. And I've heard every adjective under the sun, and it just doesn't describe it. So I hear people saying things like, the love I felt was like, imagine being hugged by 1,000 grandmas at one time.
Oh, what a beautiful saying.
Yeah. Or, some of those kinds of things are just beautiful and really stand out to me.
And I like that you say, and I appreciate that you say that it's a sacred experience and that we don't want to sensationalize it, because we can, and we do see that happen other places. And I feel like you're like this conduit that's letting people express this experience that they've had in a safe way that isn't about, make it super exciting because we need to get clicks, or, it's not that type of thing. I feel like you're giving people a safe space to share this important experience that they've had. So thank you so much for that.
Well, and that's exactly what it is. It's a safe space. It's non-judgmental. It's non-denominational. We don't try to say, oh, that couldn't have really happened, or Yeah, or sensationalize it. I just want people to tell what really happened to them. Frankly, every once in a while, I'll interview someone that I wonder if, maybe bits and pieces were made up, or maybe there's a little bit of mental health issue going on. And those we don't ever publish.
Okay. That's fair. And so when, I know you've spoken to all these different people and everyone's story is unique, which is lovely. I wonder if you see some themes in terms of maybe why somebody came back if they had a choice in it. Because I've heard sometimes that people have a choice in whether they come back. And so I'm curious about when people come back and they have a choice in it, do they tell you why? Like, has anyone shared with you, I came back because?
That's a great question. And yes, I do hear that. And this is something that in my own mind, I haven't figured out why this happens, why some people have a choice and others are just told you're going back.
Okay.
And they really don't have a choice.
Interesting.
Because the universe and the God that I believe in is all about free agency and freedom of choice. But some people don't have that choice. They are just sent back. Now, the people that do have a choice, there usually is a very good reason they feel to come back. And it's not an easy decision because they love where they are.
Okay.
And their first emotion is to stay because they've never experienced that peace and love before like they're feeling. Also, some of them have been through either a catastrophic accident or some kind of a disease for a long time. So their body is in a lot of pain. And when they're out of the body, they don't feel any of that pain. So it is a difficult choice to actually come back to a body that is probably laying in a hospital bed or on the side of a road bleeding from an accident of some sort. But it's usually because I have a child that I feel like needs me. I have a spouse that needs me. I have a mother that needs me. It's their love for somebody here that brings them back and helps them choose to make that decision to come back. The other thing that I wonder about in all this, and again, I certainly don't have all the answers, is how many people are given the choice and choose to stay, because we don't hear from those people.
We won't get to hear from them.
Is it 5%? Is it 95%? I have no idea.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. And as you're speaking, I'm wondering, so I understand that pull to come back because there's someone that you feel like you need to still care for and be with. And then you talk about the difficulty. And so I don't know, has anyone expressed to you that while they're making that choice and they're thinking, I need to come back to my family, are they also recognizing that they're coming back to a body that's that is broken, and that body may or may not fully heal?
Yes, most of them are aware of that. They don't know what it's going to take, how much it's going to take to heal. And they often feel disassociated from their body that they are coming back to. For some reason, when people leave their body, it's not a shock. It feels familiar. It's not like, oh, no, there's my body, I've got to get back. It's not like that at all. It's very common for people to tell me, I wasn't emotional about it at all. It was very matter of fact. There's my body. I've had a couple of people even refer to it as the body instead of their body because they felt so disassociated from it.
Okay. And so disassociated and yet natural, it sounds like for some people, what they're sharing with you is that it didn't seem unusual to be separate and recognizing that that's a body, my body, or the body. Right. And that didn't seem like, and in that experience, it didn't seem unusual or strange. It's felt natural.
No, it was no big deal. It wasn't scary.
Okay, cool.
For some people, it was scary to actually come back. Okay. And they felt like, I am so big, how am I ever going to fit in that little teeny body there? Because my spirit or my consciousness, whatever the person refers to it as, is big and nearly universal. And how am I going to squish back down into that little body right there?
I love that. I mean, that makes a certain kind of sense to me. Now, I know that your talks are non-denominational, and in some of your conversations, someone's beliefs may come into it. And so I'm wondering, do you ever find a correlation between if somebody identifies as a certain religious belief and the experience they have?
Yes.
Okay.
There are a lot of Christian people that say they see Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
There are people of other faiths that have seen, whatever some of the things are that they believe in their religion. A lot of people see, of all religions, a lot of people see family or other loved ones, but not everybody does.
Okay.
Some people don't see anybody. They just have this brief experience. Some people see pets.
Oh, sweet.
That they just loved. And I get a real joy out of hearing that and thinking about pets that I've had over the years, and that there's a possibility of that again, because we love them just like we love the important human beings in our life. Sure, it's a little different, but we've shared experiences with them. So those are fun to hear about too.
Oh, I'm sure. Now, I'm curious about everything, but for the sake of our discussion today, the people who come back who didn't have a choice, that where it was like, Margaret, no, you're returning. Did they feel any, like they really wanted to cling on and stay? Any aversion to coming back? What kinds of feelings have people expressed about that?
Some people have had some frustration. None of them have felt suicidal, though.
Good.
Like, it was so great there, I want to kill myself today so I can get back. That thought doesn't cross their mind, even though there can be frustration and longing for the other side.
Okay.
Instead of feeling suicidal, it's more of, when it is my time. And I don't know when that is, but then I will welcome it, and I'm not afraid of it. And that is one of the huge commonalities between these experiences, is nearly every single person has lost their fear of death. And that doesn't mean they want to die today.
Right.
There's lots to live for here, and lots of wonderful things to live for and to learn and to be with loved ones. But when the time comes, my fear of death is gone, and that's okay.
I think that's beautiful. I mean, that's something that I seek to help all of us have. And I think I have it, but I won't really know till the time comes, And so, but I think that is a beautiful part, because I do think that when we have a comfort with the next stage, with death, that then I think we can have such a more fulfilling experience here. And I wonder what anyone expresses about that in their lives since they've returned.
Yes, that is one of the things that they express. Most people are changed.
Okay.
Let me put it that way. They come back and they're a different person because of what they have experienced. Sometimes that leads to things that we would look at as unfortunate, like the divorce rate, for example, is quite high with people that have had near-death experiences.
Oh, that's interesting.
And as I've talked to people about it, why did your divorce happen, or how did you avoid divorce? It's often things like, I was different, and I had changed, and I don't really blame my spouse for having a hard time with that. And frankly, I had a hard time with them, maybe because they hadn't changed in the same ways that I had. So that's an unfortunate thing.
Okay.
But it's inevitable for some people, just because they're not married to the same person that they used to be. Sure.
That makes sense. I was almost thinking I thought maybe where you were going to go with that, and I was wrong, which is good, was that they were going to say, like, I came back and I just realized I just didn't want to spend the rest of my time here with that person. But to grow apart and have maybe not be able to share that experience, and that becoming a wedge, I understand that more. It's still sad. I mean, it's sad. We're not cheering for people to break up.
A lot of people also change jobs. their priorities have changed. And so they may have been all about, the buck and keeping up with the Joneses before. And many are not that way anymore. And they realize earthly things just don't really matter.
Yeah.
So again, if your partner is not on that same wavelength, then that can be a difficult thing for a relationship.
Oh, absolutely. If you come back and you say, I just don't want to work as much as I worked in order to pay this big mortgage or this big lease or take these fancy vacations or whatever it is, that's a change. That can be a significant change in a relationship. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that can definitely be a strain.
Sure.
But people feel like they have changed for the better. So they're okay with it and they move on.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I'm guessing, but I want to ask you this anyway. Has anyone ever said to you that they feel like before the experience that they could have been a better person, like a much better person, and then they came back and became that person?
Yeah, especially people that have experienced what has become known as a life review. Not everybody has that experience, but some people do. And they describe it as sitting in a stadium with 1,000 movie screens going on around them, showing every instance of their life. Somehow they can absorb all this knowledge at one time. They don't have to just be looking at one screen. And it can happen quite quickly. And this is a time where they can see the actions that they did during this life and how they affected other people. They can see the good. They can also see the bad and what effect that had on somebody. For some reason in that realm, they can experience those things, review them, learn from them without a whole bunch of feelings of guilt and shame that we have here often when we do things wrong.
So I can do it dispassionately, with equanimity, I would say, where I come from, with balance.
Yeah. And I can see, okay, because I did this, it affected somebody else negatively. It hurt them in some way. Now I'm going to learn from that. And I'm going to be better at that and be a better person on these many things here. And then they come back and they try to do that.
So this is where that phrase or that thought that your life flashes before your eyes, this might be where that comes from.
It might be where it comes from.
Right? Because otherwise, how would we know? There's that when you die, your life flashes before your eyes. And to your point that you made earlier, but if I don't come back, how would you know that that's what happened to me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's only the people that have come back and told me about it. And it wasn't, but for them, it wasn't just a flash. It was a very detailed, I want to say lengthy experience, although they're not experiencing time like we do here.
Right.
But because they see and understand so many things that happen to them, they interpret that as a lengthy experience, even though it may have happened in kind of a flash of time.
Right. Like we're standing around the hospital bed and they may be, I'll say, back to us, for lack of a better term, within a few minutes. But on their side, they had this full experience that if we fit it into the human time parameters, it couldn't have taken place in that time. But it did because they're in a different plane.
Right. Their heart was stopped for 4 minutes. We know that as a fact, but they felt like they experienced, days or weeks even, because so much happened.
Okay. And so is there a message that you'd like to share with everyone, kind of that's your observations or philosophies, because you've spent a lot of time with this topic and talking to people. And is there something that you'd like to share that I haven't asked you?
Yeah, one of the things that has come out and has sort of become the purpose of the podcast is to just in general help people not have a fear of death. We're living in a day and age where there's fear everywhere. I mean, just turn on the news between the wars and politics and everything negative going on, and to realize, and it's pretty much proven a medical fact now that these things are real. This isn't just speculation.
Right.
And it's not just witnesses of thousands of people. There are real medical facts pointing to this now, that, you know what, there is something else after this. And most people that have had these experiences will tell you there was something else before this life also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we don't need to fear death so much. It doesn't mean we want to die.
Right.
And doesn't mean it might not be physically painful when we go through it. But life is not over. And I think that's especially important for those of us that have lost loved ones, to be able to know that they have not just ceased to exist, that they have a spirit or a consciousness or whatever we want to call it, that extends beyond this life and is still alive, and they are more happy and feeling more joy and love now, even, believe it or not, more than they did here on this earth. And we're going to be able to join them one day. And to me, that's a great message for people to understand.
I think that's beautiful. I can't think of a better way to wrap this up. But despite that, I'm going to ask and see if there's anything else you want to add.
I think the only other thing is something I touched on earlier that I can't wait to feel someday. And that is just the extreme, overwhelming love that we're going to feel on that other side. Whether someone believes in God or not, or what kind of God they do or don't believe in, over and over and over, people are telling me this immense love that they are feeling is something. It's real. It's wonderful. You can call it God, you can call it something else, but it's a real thing. So it's just, I think it'll help us go through life a little bit easier, knowing that we just don't need to have as many fears out there as we thought we did, because there is something beyond what we're doing right here on this life.
I think that's really helpful for everyone. And I appreciate what you're doing, your work so much. And I just want to say thank you. A reminder, everyone, so you can find more of this. If you want to go more deeply into this topic, then please find Eric's Round Trip Death Podcast. And if you're curious about how he can help you with your podcast, then go find him on thebarefootgroup.com. You can tell from just this discussion what a lovely person he is and what a nice person he would be to work with. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Margaret. I appreciate it.
I would love to hear from you, your thoughts, your suggestions, your own stories about attachment. So follow this link, I'm going to read it to you in a minute here, to leave me a 90-second message with your ideas and suggestions. You can go to https://www.speakpipe.com/death_Dhamma_podcast. I suppose you could also just use your favorite search engine to say SpeakPipe Death Dhamma Podcast. And there you can record an audio message for me. And be sure to come over to margaretmaloney.com. That's MargaretMeloni.com and join the community. You've been listening to the Death Dhamma Podcast with your host, Margaret Maloney. Thank you so much for being here. Come find me on margaretmaloney.com, MargaretMeloni.com. And until we meet again, may you be well, may you be happy, may you be at ease, and may you be free from suffering. Bye for now.